Welcome back to the Doomsday School of Space Physics. It's time for the next part of the latest fear porn lesson. Last time I spoke about the darkening of our Sun and its possible cause, plasma outflows caused by the influence of an external force which I called some time ago a low energy field, which I hope can prove the existence of this unknown electromagnetic field. But before I will proceed to the main subject, I need to add some information regarding the anomalies of Sun behavior, as some of you asked me about the apparent color of visible light emitted by the star, which is changing throughout last years, and how it is connected with the growing global temperatures. Although I prefer to show actual images in my fear porn movies, I will need to use couple boring graphs to give you some answers. I hope that you won't fall asleep. Here are the solar spectral irradiance measurements. But to understand those readings, we need to learn about different wavelengths of sunlight. If your education didn't stop at the beginning of primary school, you should probably know that besides the light which can be seen with naked eye, Sun is constantly shining in colors which are beyond our perception. Light is made of multiple electromagnetic waves which spread simultaneously in space which is filled with photons, carriers of light. Everything what we can see depends on the length, frequency and amplitude of those waves. So, even if Sun in the sky appears to be mostly white or yellow, it has all possible colors of visible light, what can be seen when we use a prism, and colors which we can't see without proper equipment. Brightness of a light source depends on the amplitude of those waves, but mostly we use the term intensity instead of amplitude. Color of light depends on the frequency, which is connected with wavelengths and speed of propagation. The longer is the wave of light, the smaller is its frequency. Those two properties are connected with the amount of energy which the light is carrying. The more energy is being emitted, the higher is the frequency, while wavelengths get smaller. Most energetic form of light which we know about is known as gamma rays. Its wavelength is really tiny, around 1 picometer, while the frequency is huge, 300 exohertz, and so is the energy of photons, around 1.24 mega electron volts, even if photons don't have mass at all. Then we have the less but still highly energetic X-rays, which have their wavelengths between 0.01 to 10 nanometers and energy range between 100 electron volts to 100 kilo electron volts. Next, up until 400 nanometers, electromagnetic waves form the ultraviolet light, which still is energetic enough to cause ionization of neutral particles and serious damage of living cells. From 400 to 700 nanometers, electromagnetic waves can be seen with naked eyes, as they create the visible light. Blue color has the highest, while red the lowest frequency which we can perceive. Then, from 700 nanometers to around 1 millimeter of wavelength, electromagnetic radiation is known as infrared light. Although it is much less energetic than other light waves, it is responsible for the transfer of heat. 50% of radiation from the Sun fits in the IR band, 40% is for the visible light and 10% for the UV frequencies. X-rays are emitted mostly during solar flare events, while gamma rays are absent. Waves with the lengths from 1 mm to 100 km form microwaves and radio waves. Wavelengths from 1000 to 100,000 km are called ultra, super and extremely low frequencies waves. And that's the whole known spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. However, I wouldn't be myself if I wouldn't tell about waves which are even longer. Of course, most of professional scientists will kill me for this claim, but I think that wavelengths above 100,000 km are responsible for the gravitation. For example, the gravitational wave recorded not so long ago by LIGO was around 600,000 km long. I think that the frequency of wave is the only factor which differs gravity from other electromagnetic radiations. And now we can go back to the boring graphs to see the variations of sunlight at different wavelengths in time. Here we can see the changes of intensity of UV light, 129.5 nanometers, in the time from year 2003 until now. As you can see, there is a clear correlation between this graph and the solar cycle. But let's check other wavelengths beginning from the X-rays. This graph shows the light at 5.5 nanometers wavelengths. Here things are getting interesting, as since the beginning of 2013, Sun simply stopped to emit this kind of light. Similar drop can be seen as well in the extreme UV light at 30 nanometers. If I would be a typical fearmonger, I would proceed further, but as I actually try to provide fear porn which is based on facts, I need to show you measurements made by a different mission on which there is no sign of similar intensity drop at the same wavelengths. Instead, there is a clear decrease of intensity at UV light wavelengths. This is again 129.5 nanometers. And this is 70 nanometers. Here is 180 nanometers. Again, 180 nanometers, but recorded by the other mission. Most of you probably have enough of all those boring graphs and even more boring explanations. Luckily, we're almost done. Time to look at couple last solar irradiance graphs. Charts, which I was showing you before, indicated the spectral irradiance of sunlight at different wavelengths. This image, however, shows the data called total solar irradiance. If your IQ is just a bit higher than the IQ of an average flat earther, you should be able to guess that the word total is the key to understand those graphs. But especially for the flatties, here's the explanation. This data shows the intensity of entire sunlight spectrum instead of particular bands. We can see here couple measurements made by different missions from the year 1978 until 2014. As I said many times in the past, I am not a professional scientist and heliophysics is nothing more than some strange kind of hobby for me. However, even a complete moron should be able to notice that all those readings tell us clearly that the entire sunlight is gradually losing the intensity in its whole frequency spectrum. And to make it clear, the decrease of sunlight intensity can be seen on every single total solar irradiance graph available on the internet. Each peak of solar activity during the maximums of last 4 solar cycles is smaller than the previous one. I think that I've managed to provide you quite a lot of data regarding the decreasing intensity of sunlight, and it is the right time to point out possible causes of such significant changes of the entire solar system. But before, I have to show you the ace which I was hiding in my sleeve. If all the previous data wasn't for you convincing enough, this piece of information can be the best evidence of darkening sun. And what is so special about it? Probably the fact that I wouldn't be able to find it if not someone who was very helpful in providing the most reliable source of data regarding the decrease of sunlight intensity on satellite images. Maybe you won't believe me, but the guy who should earn all the gratitudes is probably well known to most of you. His nickname is D5UNCR. If you don't know who D5UNCR is, it can mean that you came to my channel recently or you simply don't read the comment section. D5UNCR was one of the most loyal viewers on my channel. Although in last couple months his activity was much less visible, in the beginning of my space weather homeschool he analyzed each of my movies frame by frame, looking for everything what could be used against my claims about Planet X. It seems that his biggest passion and the meaning of his life is to debunk videos which have something to do with Nibiru related stuff. Although he keeps telling that it is just his hobby, many people suspect that he is working for the government or some agency. I don't know the truth, but it is clear that he puts a lot of efforts in his debunking job, and you will find him on many different channels where Planet X is being discussed. Maybe some of you will call me stupid, but sometimes I find him quite useful for a couple of reasons. Most Planet X videos on YouTube are just complete garbage, and it's good that there is someone who keeps exposing it. He has as well some sources of information which were quite useful for me in the past. Besides, he can provide data which might cast new light on some of the statements which you can hear in doomsday fear porn movies. But for me, people like D5UNCR are important even more. Most of people can't understand why I keep talking with him. Hard to tell how many times my movies became the subject of his debunking. So why I won't simply ban him or just ignore his comments just like many other YouTubers did. However, as I said in previous movies, I try to keep the quality of my doomsday fear porn as high as I can and provide you information which I find as valuable. This is why I always try to test the strength of my claims by confronting them with someone like D5UNCR. If a claim can survive such confrontation, I can use it further in my research. But if some of my statements will turn out to be a mistake, it's better for me to fix the problem as soon as possible, instead going deeper into swampy shit. It's not a problem for me to admit being wrong. I'm just a human and my research is more like a hobby than a professional project. In the history of my channel, I've made quite a lot of false statements and some of them were pointed out by D5UNCR. Maybe you won't believe me, but I'm thankful for it. If you watch Nibiru fear porn on other channels, you'll notice probably that most of those truders won't listen to any criticism, even if they are wrong. But let's get to the point. As I said before, during last year or so, D5UNCR didn't show up on my channel as often as before. However, Dying Sun was enough to summon him from the abyss right to the comment section in one of my latest videos. Actually, I was expecting him and couldn't wait to hear some kind of official no-doom explanation. And believe me, it has to be really good to disprove all the data which I've used. Just as I expected, D5UNCR came to my channel couple days later. I expected from him something what should force me to look for some additional data, or what at least will make me to think just a bit. Instead, he told me that the decreased brightness of the sun is most likely connected with the cycles of solar activity. Of course, it was the first thing which I've checked before I started to make any of my doomsday claims. So I told him what I think about his explanation. Blue arrows point at my answer, and he probably didn't like it. To be honest, his statement about the cycle pissed me off so much that I didn't read the rest of his comment. So I didn't notice that he gave me there a second option. This one was about a script which is responsible for converting original pictures in FITS format into JPG images. For some reason, D5UNCR felt offended by my response, strange, and decided to make a movie in which he can tell how rude I was towards him and try to debunk my Dying Sun claims. I feel honored. I didn't expect any movies about my humble person after just couple years of research. Damn, I'm a famous guy now. I watched it soon after the premiere, and I really like it. I love the part in which he underlined the best sentence in my response to him. I just wanted to know if he can prove somehow his revelations about the problems with FITS JPG conversion script, or if it is nothing more than a guess. In his movie, D5UNCR seems to be really convinced about those software issues. He tells about it as about a fact. So he should have anything to support this claim, right? Not really. It turns out that he became lately so smart that each statement which he makes can be treated as a scientific fact. Damn, he's good. Okay, so let's assume for a while that D5UNCR went to a very powerful fortune teller, and this is where he found this explanation. No problem, I believe in magic. But just to ensure myself that someone with such authority as D5UNCR tell his viewers only the crystal clear truth, I decided to check those FITS files by myself. And this is what I found. Even D5UNCR had to admit it. According to the FITS images from Soho, sun became much darker during last 5 years, and because those are the original files, there can't be no software error which would explain it. So altogether, thank you very much, D5UNCR. In my previous movie, I promised you, however, that next time I will try to deal with a different subject. I promised you to look once more on couple events which took place in the past and which might be the ultimate evidence of the influence of a rogue and unknown electromagnetic field, which I called a low energy field. Although I discussed it long time ago, event which is known as Magnetopause reversal is probably the best possible clue that Earth might be affected by unknown forces which are capable to overcome the pressure of solar wind and blow the magnetosphere in opposite direction, something what shouldn't be possible. On the old SWMF magnetosphere simulation, disturbances started to be visible during the day of 9 March 2012. Those images made a lot of mess on YouTube in the scientific community. Of course, after some time, NASA made an official announcement that all those anomalies were caused by some error in the simulation. Last time, when I was discussing this event, I couldn't give you any data which would prove that magnetopause reversal took place in real life and SWMF simulation worked properly during this time and managed to generate quite accurate images. But now I know how to compare the simulation with actual satellite recordings and other data. First, let's look at SWMF magnetosphere cuts. Such behavior of magnetosphere is impossible until we won't add a force which is opposing the constant flow of solar wind. During the day of 9th March, Sun managed to win this competition, and a wave of solar particles turned the magnetotail to its normal direction. However, plasma velocity vectors from the SWMF Z-cut monitor show that there was a moment of time when the direction of solar wind was inverted and particles started to flow from the night side of magnetosphere towards the Sun. Such situation shouldn't be possible at all. Problem is that such impossible magnetosphere behavior wasn't just a single event. Competition between solar wind and the opposing force was visible on SWMF monitors for the next 4 days. Sadly, people from CCMC deleted all the images which were generated between 12 and 13 of March. However, they were available earlier for quite a long time. I'm sure they don't want us to be bothered by some stupid glitches and error in the simulation. But I wouldn't be myself if I wouldn't let you see what happened on SWMF monitors during the time frame of erased data, between 12 and 13 of March. My adventure with space weather began 4 years ago after I saw those images. I'm sure that after March 2012, number of amateur Planet X researchers was doubled. This data is capable to shake the space science society, and some people don't want to make it happen. This is why NASA gave us the official explanation and called those images as garbage, result of an error which was caused by wrong input data. SWMF simulations use the solar wind parameters from ACE satellite. If those readings are messed up, the simulation won't work properly. During this time, space weather activity was indeed high. On 12th of March, Earth was seriously affected by something what looks like a combination of a CME impact with a coronal hole stream, which arrived couple hours later. I've marked this event with blue arrows. Such combination of two different solar activities is pretty rare, but not completely uncommon, and it can't be blamed for the Magnetopause reversal. Problem is that the data recorded by ACE satellite doesn't seem to be corrupted in any way. It means that the input data for the SWMF simulation was okay. In such case, official NASA explanation is the only garbage here. It's just a guess, but it might be possible that those satellites are not capable to measure the plasma from a solar wind which blows from behind. Besides, something such significant as the Magnetopause reversal would be probably noticed by every single satellite, and we shouldn't have any problems to find some evidences of this event in different recordings. Of course, there is no sense to check all this data after NASA stated officially that all the results of SWMF magnetosphere simulation on which we could see the reversal of Magnetopause are nothing more than garbage, and they can't be treated seriously by scientists. We all know that NASA couldn't lie to us in such serious case. It's not that I don't trust the people who work for the government. Or maybe it is. But in my stupid nature is to check every bit of information by myself. Let's begin from ACE recordings, where we can see some strange and violent drop of solar wind velocity in the night of March 13. I pointed it with orange arrow. Here it is visible better. In the matter of couple minutes, velocity of solar wind fell suddenly from 500 to less than 300 km per second, and jumped back to 500 couple hours later. Of course, this anomaly is way too small to prove the Magnetopause reversal, but still it might give us a hint that something strange could happen around this time. Don't forget as well that on the SWMF monitors, Magnetopause reversal started couple days before the main event on March 13. If we'll look at ACE recordings from previous days, we might find something much more interesting. Beginning from 12 UTC on March 7th till the noon of March 9th, ACE satellite recorded something what might be the most backward gust of solar wind in our history. Although velocity of solar wind remained slightly below 300 km per second, it is clear as hell that such space weather activity is completely wrong. It began with a wave of increased plasma density, just like soon before the arrival of fast solar wind, only this time velocity started to grow down. Ladies and gentlemen, take a good look at a completely new kind of space weather activity, which can be called as reversed coronal hole stream, or maybe you know how to call it better. This time it would be hard to explain those readings with corrupted data and software errors. They could try to blame ACE satellite, but how to explain recordings from different satellites where the same event is visible as well? You might be interested in the fact that this unexplained drop of solar wind velocity was directly connected with a strong inflow of high-energy protons caused by a flux transfer event which followed a strong eruption of M-class solar flare 2 hours earlier. I would love to see what NASA can say about those readings. And this is how we came to the data recorded by Themis satellites. Those readings are probably the main source of our current knowledge regarding the magnetosphere. 5 satellites give us the most crucial information about cosmic interactions between celestial bodies and their electromagnetic fields. it would be hard to count all the discoveries which were achieved thanks to the data gathered by Timmy's mission. Of course, in order to use this data properly, we need to possess a big dose of proper education. People spend many years on the best universities to become professional scientists and learn how to read all those funky charts and use them in scientific publications. I am, on the other hand, someone who treats space physics as some kind of sick hobby. Trying to understand difficult data is for me a way in which I spend my free time. Most people play computer games when they are bored. I like to search for all kind of scientific data which looks weird to me. I love when charts have a lot of funky colors. Of course, just like before, I will try to contact someone from the Timmy's staff and ask for an official opinion about my research. There is even a big chance that I'll get a response. In the difference to other institutions and organizations, people working in the Timmy's mission office are not afraid to speak with someone who like to ask difficult questions. I just wonder if they will keep their promise to put a link to my movie on their official site. Anyway, I'll begin with the data recorded by P1 and P2 satellites, which orbit around the Moon. Let's start from the 5th of March, 2 days before the solar wind anomalies appeared on readings from the ACE satellite. I would love to visualize this data in VisBard application, but it seems that after one of the Java updates, something is wrong with the certificate and the applet won't work anymore. I lost one of my favorite toys. Rest in peace, VisBard. Now I have to use the Orbit Viewer, which allows the 3D visualization of satellites' orbits in the most primitive form. Forget about dynamic environment or visualization of scientific data. White circle represents the Moon. Red square shows the P1 craft. Green circle is the symbol of P2 satellite. It is important to notice that during this period of time, Moon was placed on the night side of Earth. Together with both satellites, it passed already through the bow shock of magnetosphere, green grid, and crossed the Magnetopause, white grid, in the night between 5th and 6th of March. During the sudden drop of solar wind velocity, P1 and P2 satellites were traveling already deep within the magnetotail. Sadly, it means that there was a strong influence of Earth's magnetic field on their recordings at this time. Data gathered during March 5th and 6th is a nice example of typical recordings during the crossings of magnetotail. Similar readings can be seen every month when Moon enters the magnetosphere. But now, look at the readings from March 7th. This enormous wave of energetic particles appeared on those charts exactly in the same moment when shit started to hit the fan on the ACE recordings. Of course, this event was recorded by both lunar Timmy's satellites. But let's look at the readings from the crafts which orbit around Earth. This data was recorded on March 6th, one day before the event. Black arrows mark the time when satellites move away from the planet and go through the inner magnetosphere. Check out how the incoming wave of plasma affected our magnetic field. There are no doubts that this event was very strong. It is a real battle. In the left corner, professional army of veteran scientists, natural-born champions of martial science trained by the Imperial Army to become the elite, the most famous special force of global science, NASA SEALs. In the right corner, me, researcher for fun, Some unknown guy who thinks that he learned the martial science from YouTube. You might think that there can be only one result of such battle. My head on a stake in front of the main entrance to the NASA headquarters. But thanks to the intensive training which I went through during last 4 years, I mastered a lot of new abilities. My opponents can be surprised. Let's begin with 2 punches. First one, recordings from Geotail satellite. Those charts show the main parameters of plasma: density, velocity and temperature. Below is the energy spectrum of ions and electrons. This data was recorded between March 6th and March 10th. I think that there is no need to talk about the wave of energetic particles, which is visible here just as well as on the Timmy's recordings. But here is the best part. The second graph from top shows the velocity of plasma. In the difference to ACE satellite, it is capable to show the backside gust of solar wind. In this scale, 0 point is in the middle and the range is from -800 to 800 km per second. Red arrows point out 2 events during which the direction of solar wind flow was turned by 180 degrees. In this period of time, Geotail satellite entered the magnetosphere. This is why the velocity of solar wind dropped almost to 0. On the right side there is a diagram of the orbit with all days marked by black points. Time for the second punch. A special technique called data recorded by wind satellite. But you can call it simply wind of death. I've made up this name right now. Wind is placed on the same orbit as ACE and SOHO satellites. And just like them, it measures the properties of solar wind. Graphs which are marked by the arrows are the ones which I'm interested in. Those 2 parameters are actually the only ones which differ ACE and wind recordings. They show the angle at which solar wind flows towards Earth. ACE doesn't measure it. So, according to the data from all official space weather institutions, solar particles are moving from Sun to Earth along a straight line. But the event which was recorded by wind on 8th of March 2012 can be used as a nice example to prove that it isn't exactly the truth. Arrows point at a sudden shift of the angle, what means that there was an obvious change in the direction of solar wind flow, and by accident it happened during the time of Magnetopause reversal event. And because it seems that coincidences come in pairs, we can find another shift, even bigger one, in the data recorded on March 12, just when the SWMF simulations started to show the most extreme backside gust. And now something what tigers like at most. As I said before, this BART, which was my favorite visualization tool, doesn't work anymore. Luckily, during my research, I've gathered quite a lot of different toys. It turns out that I won't need to use shitty 4D orbit viewer. Application which you can see is called 3D View CDPP, and it's almost as good as this BART. It has most of the options with couple additional ones. But it can't visualize MHD simulation results, and the magnetospheric field lines are not dynamic, or I'm too stupid to turn this option on. Most important is that it works very well if we want to display satellite recordings in 3D environment. It can even place the spectral images along the orbits. I've switched off the magnetospheric field lines to make satellites data visible better. This scene includes all the readings which I've presented you before, except the solar wind readings from ACE. Scene starts on 5th of March and ends on March 15. Let's begin by comparing the spectral images of plasma from Geotail and lunar Timmy's satellites. As we can see, wave of energetic particles appeared on both recordings almost at the same time. However, on the spectral image from Timmy's craft, we can see that some strange disturbance was recorded just before the wave. This event could be connected with the outflow of plasma, as the density of particles was reduced greatly. Disturbance was recorded one day before the impact and took place for almost exactly 24 hours. It can be caused by the fact that at this time Timmy's satellite was passing through the Magnetopause. However, I didn't notice any similar disturbances during the time when Moon was leaving the magnetosphere. Besides, it seems to match the time when the backside gusts were recorded by the geotail satellite. Sadly, I couldn't find the data which would allow me to visualize it in the 3D view application. Now let's look closer at the data from Timmy's B satellite. Bigger vectors with funky colors represent the direction of plasma flow. I've switched on the logarithmic scale to visualize them better, so their length doesn't matter as much as their color, where violet shows the lowest and red highest values. Thin white needles represent the direction and magnitude of local magnetic field. This value is non-logarithmic, so the longer the needle is, the bigger is the magnitude. This is how the plasma velocity vectors look like if I switch off the logarithmic scale. Maybe I leave it this way, as the data is now easier to understand. Look here closely. Those three vectors clearly point out in opposite direction to the solar wind flow. Velocity of plasma wasn't too big, and I'm not sure if it wasn't some kind of electric current placed along the surface of Magnetopause. However, during the following days, similar backside gusts can be seen pretty often. Those two plasma bubbles were recorded right at the time of wave impact. We can see nicely that they moved from the Earth towards the far magnetotail at pretty high velocity. I think that it was some kind of discharge caused by the magnetic reconnection during the initial impact. Now let's check the geotail readings from the same period of time. As I said before, I can't visualize the plasma velocity vectors, but the scalar value is here visualized as a line which I placed behind the satellite orbit. Vectors show here the direction and magnitude of magnetic field. This is the data recorded at the time when disturbances started to be visible on readings from Timmy's satellites. We can see nicely that some kind of activity can be seen here as well. Magnitude of IMF dropped together with a shift of orientation and a drop of solar wind velocity, what is visible on the line as green color. And now let's move to Earth to check the readings from Timmy's P5 satellite. Just like in the case of moon orbiting crafts, bigger and colorful vectors represent the velocity of ions, while the white and thin ones show the magnetic field. But I think that better to switch them off for now. During the first 2 days, space weather activity was pretty low, so you can see the map of cold magnetosphere. Notice that in those areas, vectors point out into opposite direction of solar wind flow. However, this might be connected with the current ring, in which trapped particles rotate around Earth, forming a kind of plasma donut. Those couple vectors which are pointing southward might indicate that in this area Timmy's craft passed through the radiation belts. But those two vectors are more interesting. Those recordings were made couple hours before the wave impact and might confirm the backside gust, as they match the time of disturbances recorded by other satellites. And now look at the readings recorded during the impact. Although it might look pretty hardcore, it means only that the magnetosphere was strongly compressed by the incoming dense wave of solar particles. However, I need to point out those two vectors, which look pretty odd to me. On previous recordings of this region, particles were flowing southward, while after the impact they started to move towards the bow shock. What can be another confirmation of backside gusts? However, there is nothing similar in the data from lunar crafts. Here we can see that the direction of plasma flows was rearranged in another region of inner magnetosphere. Here the vector started to point southward once more. Now, let's focus on the event which took place on March 13, at the time when on SWMF simulation the Magnetopause was completely reversed. Although this time there is much less disturbances on the readings from other satellites, some kind of activity is visible clearly on the lunar Themis satellites. Just like before, a strange wave of plasma was recorded by both crafts. But there are a couple differences. This event didn't affect the IMF and it wasn't connected with geomagnetic activity. AE index didn't change at all during the impact. But let's look at the ESA readings, where we can see one of the best evidences of Magnetopause reversal event. It seems that the incoming wave of particles caused a significant decrease of plasma velocity. Strangely, It seems to affect only the ions, while the velocity of electrons didn't change too much. The drop of velocity is visible as well on the second lunar craft, but most important is the fact that during this time Moon already left the magnetotail, so this disturbance can't be possibly caused by some kind of magnetosphere instability. Let's see the visualization of those recordings. Here you can see this rapid decrease, and there is no possible explanation of this event. There is of course more data regarding the Magnetopause reversal event, and I could spend twice so much time showing you a lot of interesting readings, but I want to make this movie as short as possible, and I still have to talk about another event which for me is even more significant.